Welcome back to my channel. This is JT Reads and I am Jess, the J in JT Reads, and I read a lot. As Jess Mariano would say, what is a lot? I read some books sometimes when I'm feeling in the mood to read books, and mostly I like to read horror. In 2023 I read 30 horror books, and I am going to rank them for you right now from least favourite. We use the word least favourite very carefully and don't say worst, but worst, to the best. The very best, most favourite horror book that I read in 2023. Because there are 30 books here and I don't want to be here all day and neither do you, I'm going to give one-line reviews. I'm providing one-line reviews right now. So if I can't remember reading this book, well, that's its review. Not memorable. Let's get started. First up, I'm going to say as a disclaimer, there are quite a few short story collections in here, and as a major life plot twist, I discovered towards the end of 2023, I don't think I like short stories. And that's not to say they're not good, because they are good, but that's the problem. The problem is that they're too good, and I get to the end of a short story, and I'm so invested, I want to know more information, but it's over, and I just struggle to come to terms with that. There is, for example, I'm reading Never Whistle at Night at the moment. Photo, thank you. And the title story is so interesting. It's all about how if you whistle in the Appalachian Mountains, is that what they're called? I hope so. And so, well, it's not about whistling. You shouldn't whistle. Never whistle at night. Okay, the proof's in the pudding. If you whistle and someone whistles back, that's not a real person. And it's just so exciting. That's such a cool concept. But it's like 10 pages long and then it's over. I need a novel. I need a full novel about that lore. So if you know of one, please share, because I'm so intrigued. I want to read more about it. Okay, let's get started. I don't think I'm mentally prepared for this, but I just don't want any backlash, okay? These opinions are my own, and if you've got differing opinions, I'm pleased to hear it, excited to hear it. Kicking us off for my least favourite horror I read in 2023, it is Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. I rated this 1 star, and I really wanted to like it. I had such high hopes. I think that's what hurts more. My hopes were sky high, and they were crushed. My one-line review is, gratuitous hate from all angles. Not horror. Not quite horror, but horrifying. That's all I'm saying on the matter. Next up, I have Tender is the Flesh by Augustus Bazterrica. I rated this 2 stars, and my one-line review is, fantastic premise, boring as fluff, execution. It's cannibalism. How can you bore me with cannibalism? I've said one-line review, but I'm off on a rant. So boring. I think the first few pages were shock factor, and I was hooked, and then it fizzled out, and that was it. I was bored. How can I be reading about cannibalism and be bored? Make it make sense. Next up, and we're getting into kind of the okay ratings now, I have Life Ceremony by Sayaka Murata. I rated this 3 stars, so we're coming in at an okay. I'm having an okay time. I'm not going to reread you. I'm not going to recommend you. You're okay. My review is, I expect everything Murata writes to live up to Earthlings, but nothing ever does. This was a bit boring, but had some really good ideas. Very creative. It's not Earthlings. That's what my review should just be. It's not Earthlings. Next up, we have Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Core. And again, I rated this 3 stars. Run of the mill, not bad, not good, acceptable. My review is, the writing was stunning, but where was the plot? I mean, the plot was kind of plotting, but it wasn't very interesting. And what hurt more was that I was disappointed, because I love Cassandra Core. She's up there with one of my favourite horror authors, so I expected more and was left empty. An empty, empty void. Didn't even give me nightmares. Didn't even check behind me to see if there was monsters. Didn't even look under the bed, you know? That's the sign of a bad horror. Next up we have Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. Again, I rated this 3 stars, and this was imaginative and quirky, but just not enough. Not enough to get me excited. This was around the time that I started thinking maybe short stories aren't for me, because I would start to get invested in a story and then nothing would happen. That's all I've got to say on Cursed Bunny. I also don't really remember it much. Was there a cursed bunny? I can't remember. Was there a cursed bunny? I don't know. Next up we have a long title, so bear with me if I stumble over it. The Haunting Season. Ghostly Tales for Long Winter Nights. Thank you. Thank you, laptop. You're doing the most. And this was a collection of short stories by several different authors, one of which was Bridget Collins. Bridget Collins wrote The Binding. I thought it was behind me, it's not. And I loved The Binding. And The Binding is not horror, so when I saw that Bridget Collins had written a horror story as part of a short story collection, well, I was very intrigued. I thought, a great author, a great genre. Match them together and what have you got?
Boring.
Winter nights? Yes. These were frosty, dark, atmospheric, but ghostly and haunting? Not really. That was lacking. I'm seeing a theme. Because next up we have Salt Slow by Julia Armfield. Now, I read Our Wives Under the Sea, also in 2023. It's coming, and really enjoyed it, so read this afterwards, comparing, expecting, disappointed. So the problem with these short stories were, there was one story, I can't remember what the story was called, so obviously it wasn't memorable at all, but it just dragged the entire rating down for me. Some of the other stories were really interesting, but again, they finished before I can even get started. I think that Armfield is better suited to writing novels, and we'll talk more about that later. Oh, I rated it 3 stars. Anyway, whatever. Next up, The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Now, I rated this 3 stars, and this is a classic horror, so I needed to read it. As a horror fan, I needed to read some classic. I was curious, and I think that it's a product of its time, so I imagine that when it came out it was quite spooky, but horror has become so modernized and so advanced, and authors have to get so creative now to make new ideas of what we can be scared of. See Mermaids later. And it just fell short a little bit for me. This is not a one-line review. I've ruined my own video by talking, but, well, my one-line review would be good for its time, but the dialogue was clunky, the characters weren't very well rounded, but the ending was pretty good. It's one of those ones where you kind of feel like you have to read it, and I'm glad I did. I really enjoyed reading it, but not enough to rate it any higher than 3. Next up we have the Amityville. I know I can't say this word, but I'm trying for your benefit. The Amityville. It's so hard. Amityville? Is it Amityville? Horror by Jay Anson. Amityville. Again, I rated this 3 stars, and again, this is classic horror. So, felt obliged to read it because I love horror and was curious as to what classics would provide. Side note, we're in 2024, but I'm going to mention it real quick. I've just finished reading The Woman in Black. Incredible. So, I know that some classic horrors get it right for me. This one was okay. The same as Haunting of Hill House, this was okay. My one-line review would be a good haunted house horror, but modern authors have done it better. Sorry. We're getting into the slightly more favourable ones now. Still 3 stars, but coming in next is Last to Leave the Room by Caitlin Starling. I read this towards the end of the year, and I did rate this 3 stars, but that's because I don't think I was really the intended audience. So my one-line review is big brain energy, so interesting, too heavy on the sci-fi, too light on the horror for me to rate it any higher. If you like sci-fi and enjoy a bit of horror, then I highly recommend it. But if you are a horror girly, then maybe give this one a miss. It's here. I'm so sorry. Please forgive. Is the door now going to appear in my basement? And a duplicate of myself going to appear? Maybe it was quite scary. I also don't have a basement, so I'm probably fine. Probably. Let's move on real fast. Next up we have Hare House by Sally Hinchcliffe. We are stepping into the good zone. I rated this 4 stars. If you watch my most recent video, I think it's my most recent one, I actually changed my Goodreads rating from 3 to 4 because I think I was being unreasonable. So unlike me. My 1-line, possibly 2-line review would be unsettling, but not creepy. I didn't check behind me as I was reading it, so not a 5 star, but I did have a good old time reading it. Like, I was always excited to pick it up, so 4 stars for sure. Next up, we have The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez, and this was, again, a 4 star. Now, this is interesting because this is short stories, and my 1-line review would be, I love everything Enriquez writes. She can do no wrong in my eyes. The spook factor was there, the shock factor was there. That's it. Next up, we have Ghost Wall by Sarah Moss, and I rated this 4 stars. My 1-line review would be, it was a slow build up for quite a short book. However, it was building up to something pretty good, and I was hooked. So it did it right. It did the slow build up. I hate when there's a slow build up and then nothing happens. And I'm like, what were you building for? All of this atmosphere wasted, just dissipating into the atmosphere. There's atmosphere in the atmosphere. She did good. Good job. 10 out of 10. Not 10 out of 10. 4 out of 5. Next up, we have a combo, and I read PTSD Radio in 3 parts. It is a graphic novel, and it is horror. My 1-line review would be, these were all unnerving and gross. The lights kept flickering in my house as I was reading the last one, which very much added to the atmosphere. But I was fully creeped out reading them anyway, checking behind me constantly, peeping out the windows to be like, is there a face staring at me right now? I am lost for words. Really spooky. That's it. Good review. I'm doing a good job. Next up, we have Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. I rated this 4 stars. I also read her book, In the Dream House. I loved that. I didn't put it as horror because although it was quite horrific, I think it is technically a memoir. But that is fantastic. She is such a good writer. But this is not my review. We are talking about Her Body and Other Parties, and my review is, quite simply, give me more. I want to read everything they've ever written and just submerge myself in it, drown myself in the horror. Moving on, we have Through the Woods by Emily Carroll, and this was the first graphic novel I've ever read. As far as I'm aware, I don't know. I read it before PTSD, and she's also a 4 star. My 1-line review is, I was so invested in both the characters and the plot, which is no mean feat for a graphic novel with minimal text. That is such an achievement. To have me care about your characters in general is hard enough, but in a format where there is very little text, to have me care, I'm impressed. I immediately bought her next book, A Guest in the House, and it is on my TBR shelf right there, and I can't wait to read it. I'm saving it for one of those cold, wintry, spooky nights so I can freak myself out. And we wonder why we have nightmares. Coming in at another 4 stars, we have A Certain Hunger by Chelsea Summers. My 1-line review would be, this is cannibalism done right. Tender as the flesh walked, so this could run. I was so invested in the plot, it had me rooting for, I can't even say morally grey main character. She was dark grey. Very, very dark grey morals in this main character, but I'm rooting for her. I'm like, get away from the police, eat those bodies, chew that buttock. Am I okay? Well, we don't be asking that question out loud. It was funny, and is this a safe space to admit this? I'm sure it is. Maybe kind of hungry. Like, she is a good food writer. I was peckish. I was thinking maybe I'll just slice off a buttock from an ex, you know? I regret so many things that I say. Editing me has a challenge ahead of her. Let's move on and talk about The Ghostwoods by C.J. Cook. A fantastic author, by the way, and also a 4-star book. The characters were all very well written and very well rounded, and for a book that has quite a few characters in, I think that's very impressive. I cared about each character, and I cared about where the plot was going. I couldn't guess where the plot was going to go. The plot twists I didn't see coming. Like, the writing is nothing fancy, it's not flowery. I think if anything it's perhaps YA or NA, but the plot, very, very good. 4 stars. Next up we have Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. 4 stars, and what a ride. I will give you a 5-word review. Weird, feral, shocking, was a really loud bang. Am I in danger? Weird, feral, shocking? Confused? Obsessed? Next up, we have another 4-star coming on in with What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This was my first foray into Sporra, and it made me want to read every Sporra book ever written. It was the perfect level of creepy, but also very, very clever. I like to feel intelligent whilst I'm getting creeped out, okay? Okay, next up we have The Manning Tree Witches by A.K. Blakemore. I made some rough notes, and all I wrote was, say something. I have no recollection of this book. There's witches in it. They come from Manning Tree? It was so good. I remember raving about this. I bought The Glutton, also by A.K. Blakemore, because I love this so much. You know when you finish a book and you immediately go and purchase something else they've written because you're like, oh yeah, this is a good author. I did that, and I don't do that with just anybody. But I have no memory of this. All I can tell you is witches were in it, and I enjoyed it. I'm doing such a good job. Next up we have Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. I rated this 4 stars, and this is my last 4 stars. So hang in there, things are about to get spicy. This was an unhinged, unreliable female main character who destroys men. Need I say any more? Oh, I didn't rate this 5 stars because some of the dialogue was a little YA for me. That's literally the only complaint I had. Otherwise, perfect, no notes. Next up we have, coming in at 4.5 stars, we're almost there, Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. What a journey! In all seriousness, this was an incredible portrayal of trauma in children. It had the essence of revenge, had escapism, and, spoiler alert, I'll wait. It had a merry old cannibalism time. Incredible. I don't know why I didn't rate it 5 stars. I think I would be admitting that I am myself unhinged if I rated it 5 stars. I thought 4.5 is a safe bet, you know? Next up we have 19 Claws and a Blackbird, again by Agustina Bazdarica. I really hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And this was a collection of short horror stories. Before I realised I didn't like them, because I loved this. This is what got me to read Tender as the Flesh, and this is why I think it hurt so much when Tender as the Flesh was boring. But equally, I remember nothing. The cover is pretty, but I can't remember anything, so Google it, I don't know. What, were you here for a review or something? More for you! I don't know what I'm talking about. I have no memory. We're gonna move on and talk about Things We Lost in the Fire by Mariana Enriquez. Again, a short story collection by Mariana. One of my favourites, but I have nothing to say. I liked it. I rated it 5 stars. I'm rethinking all of my life choices. Next up, we have The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Core. This is what made me read Nothing But Blackened Teeth. So you see why my badly rated books are because I read these fantastic books first. I rated this 5 stars. This was visceral. The descriptions are disgusting. It takes a lot for me to cringe at something, but ew. It was uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable, but it was stunning. I feel like my review should just be ew, but with a thumbs up, you know? 5 stars, but ew. We're in the top 3, and here we go. Next up we have She is a Haunting by Trang Than Tran, and I have talked this book to death. I am obsessed. It is naturally in my top 3. This is a YA haunted house, queer representation without it being a main plot romance, wholesome and believable father-daughter relationship, and colonialism commentary. It had everything and more. It was incredible. I talk about it to everybody. Anyone who's like, oh, I quite like horror. She is a Haunting. She is a Haunting. Right now, in your wish list, stick it there. She is a Haunting. She is. Did I mention it's called She is a Haunting? Buy it. Acquire it. We're in the top 2. We have Lapvona by Tessa Moshfegh. Naturally, this was a 5-star read for me. This was revolting. This was uncomfortable. The characters are unlikable. I don't like any of them. We have dark, dark grey morals. we're talking darker than boy parts, dark grey morals. Perhaps no morals. It shows the very worst in human nature for our entertainment and exploits it when they reach like their peak levels of despair and fear. A good old time, a merry, merry old time. We've made it. Numero uno, number one, the top horror book I read in 2023 was Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. You now see why Salt Slow was so hurtful for me. This was a combo of horror and literary fiction, so it was written beautifully and was horrifying. It had like a heartbreaking portrayal of grief and love and tragedy and loving someone so much that you know you have to let them go. Oh, my heart cannot. It was uncomfortable, claustrophobic horror, but it was so beautifully written and sapphic. Romance. Women loving women. I would love to go back in time and read it for the first time again. The audiobook, by the way, incredible. I am envious of anybody who hasn't read this and now gets to read it for the first time. That's how strongly I feel about it. And to be fair, Lapvona and Our Wives Under the Sea were fighting for top billing. But it was the literary fiction that won me over because it is just written so wonderfully. She is a great writer. Hence why Salt Slow hurt my feelings so much. I felt that on a personal level. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any horror recommendations that I can add to my 2024 TBR, please let me know. These shelves, there's space. Like, here. There's space there for your recommendation. There's space here, but we can make it work. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in a video very, very soon. Bye!